With the incoming Ghostbusters reboot, I thought now would be a good time to look back at the series, specifically the underappreciated sequel. In 1982, director Ivan Reitman was working with some other producers to make an adaptation of the sci-fi comedy novel, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He had a meeting with Dan Aykroyd about another project, a script Aykroyd had written called Ghost Smashers. The script was about a future where ghosts were so common, teams of ghost smashers were located all over the world, like police or firefighters. Reitman loved the idea and decided to move forward with that instead of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy movie. The script as it was originally written was far too expensive to make, so Reitman brought in Harold Ramis to do a rewrite. They changed the name to Ghostbusters, and on June 8, 1984, the film was released. It was a monumental hit, pulling in nearly $300 million worldwide, making it the second highest-grossing film of 1984. With that kind of success, the studio immediately wanted a sequel. Because of the overwhelming success of the original, and the pressures that would come with trying to follow it up, Reitman decided to pass on the sequel so he could work on Legal Eagles and Twins. During that time, the Ghostbusters' popularity grew. Rather than sit on the property, the studio joined with animation company Deke Enterprises to create The Real Ghostbusters. They had to call it The Real Ghostbusters because of a pre-existing copyright. In 1975, Filmation produced a live-action comedy series called The Ghostbusters. Filmation sued Columbia over the movie in 1985, and they settled out of court. Wanting to capitalize on the success of the movie, Filmation created an animated remake of their existing live show and released it on September 8, 1986, 5 days before Deke released The Real Ghostbusters. Audiences were confused over the two series. Some were even furious, thinking that Tracy the Ape from Ghostbusters was the animated version of Winston Zeddemore, since The Real Ghostbusters was a continuation of the movie, and not the oddball concoction that Ghostbusters was. It ended up being more successful, running for 7 seasons from 1986 to 1991. After seeing the continued success of the franchise, as well as constant pressure from the studio, Reitman and Aykroyd decided it was time for the sequel. With the high demand, they had no trouble securing the $37 million budget, as well as having the original cast return. Since the characters were already defined in the original, they were able to jump right into the story with the sequel. It was set 5 years after the events of the first film. Through some revisionist history of the general public, the Ghostbusters had been discredited, and are now doing whatever they can to get by. Aykroyd was fascinated with the paranormal and the substance known as ectoplasm. He thought it would be a unique idea to have all the negativity in New York manifest itself as a river of negativity slime. Ramis and Aykroyd wrote the script, but much of the dialogue was ad-libbed during the production. The movie was shot in late 1988 and early 1989. The exteriors were shot mostly in New York, while the interiors were on sets in California. Ghostbusters headquarters was the Hook and Ladder Company, number 8, in New York. Since the visuals played such a heavy part in the series, Dennis Muren from Industrial Light and Magic was brought in early to work with Reitman to create the look of the ghosts. While the original Ghostbusters was only rated PG, this was 1984 PG, which was pre-PG-13. The movie had some adult themes and some genuinely grotesque ghost designs. For the sequel, they had to do things differently. Since The Real Ghostbusters was such a hit, the studio knew that more kids would be going to see the sequel, so they made the ghost design silly and over-exaggerated, instead of scary. Although the exception was the villain Vigo, whose look was downright creepy. To counter this, they had Peter MacNicol play Dr. Poha, his servant on Earth. The character was goofy, and even though he did some menacing things, he did them in a humorous way, which made him come across as less of a threat. Another thing they changed because of the cartoon was Slimer, although originally the cast and crew called him Onion Head. It wasn't until the cartoon when the writers called him Slimer and made him a sort of pet of the Ghostbusters. Originally Slimer wasn't in the sequel, but he was so popular amongst kids, they added him in. The character of Janine was also changed to match her appearance in the cartoon. The villainous Vigo's last name was a combination of things. Wilhelm von Homburg, who played Vigo, and the twins who played Oscar, William and Henry Deutschendorf, combined to become Vigo von Homburg Deutschendorf. Max von Sydow provided Vigo's voice. The kid in the beginning, who calls the Ghostbusters full of crap, is Jason Reitman, the son of the director. He grew up to become a fairly well-known director in his own right, with movies like Thank You for Smoking, Up in the Air, and Juno. Reitman's daughter Catherine plays the girl in Egon's lab. She became an actress, probably best known as Maureen Ponderosa on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. In an early trailer, we see a woman being pulled out of a courtroom by an invisible being. This is because the footage was so early, the ghost effect hadn't been added yet. The slime in the movie was a mix of vegetable brand Methacel, mixed with various food coloring. They had a variety of consistencies depending on what it had to do for a particular scene. For the slime river, they used the concoction but added something called diamond dust, which is the glitter-like material added to metallic paint. Underneath the river, they had pumps and manifolds to give it that living appearance. The mink coat coming to life was originally intended for the first movie, but was cut. The joystick used to control the Statue of Liberty was a modified NES Advantage. While it's common now, the term Proton Pack, the name of the Ghostbusters backpack, was never spoken until partway into Ghostbusters 2. The psychiatrist in the movie is Brian Doyle Murray, Bill Murray's brother. After a lengthy time filming, the movie wrapped. In the original Ghostbusters, for the video of the theme song by Ray Parker Jr., they had various celebrities join in the chorus. The theme of Ghostbusters 2, On Our Own by Bobby Brown, did a similar thing. They had various celebrities of the time staring off in the distance, presumably either watching the music video or looking at whatever the Ghostbusters are doing. While the song didn't prove as big a hit as the original theme, at least Brown didn't get sued for ripping off Huey Lewis. The studio wanted to squeeze as much money as they could out of the film, so they had tons of merchandising. The movie was released on June 16, 1989. And even though it opened at number 1 at the box office, it quickly dropped off and only made $215 million worldwide. Critics weren't happy with the film and called it an unfunny retread of the original. Most were disappointed that they didn't try anything new. Reitman and Aykroyd lamented that they waited just a little too long to do the sequel. In the years after its release, the film has grown a following, and while it's not as revered as the original, it has a loyal fan base. In the late 90s, during the extreme sports explosion, Columbia decided to make a next-generation Ghostbusters. They considered making a movie where the original Ghostbusters passed the torch off to this younger generation, but instead decided to make Extreme Ghostbusters, another animated program. It only lasted 1 season. In the early 2000s, Reitman, Aykroyd, and Ramis all toyed with the idea of making a third movie. The majority of the cast was on board, except for Bill Murray, who flat out refused. Ramis sent him a copy of the proposed script, which he promptly put through a paper shredder, and mailed it back to him, saying he refused to read it. Murray finally said he'd only be in the movie if he could play a ghost. The studio showed interest in the sequel, and they were going to start production right after Harold Ramis finished working on a film he was sure to be a hit, Year One, with Jack Black and Michael Cera. The movie was a massive failure, pulling in over $62 million versus its $60 million budget. Seeing this as a sign of things to come, the studio lost interest in Ghostbusters 3. During this time, Columbia licensed out the Ghostbusters name, and Ghostbusters the video game was born. The game took place 2 years after Part 2. Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, and Ernie Hudson all did the voice work for their characters. With Aykroyd and Ramis helping with the script doctoring, the game felt like a proper sequel to the second movie, and surprised almost everyone. With the untimely passing of Harold Ramis in 2014, the game will be the last thing the original Ghostbusters team did together. Ghostbusters 2 was a movie that was unfairly dismissed when it first came out. It had the insane task of trying to replicate the success of the original, and while I agree it's not as good, that doesn't automatically mean bad. The movie does share some of the same beats as the original, but by expanding the characters and adding to the already unique formula, they created a good sequel to a great movie. As for all the critics who complained about the lack of creativity and humor, they must have been doused with negativity slime.